It's Kickball 101, Stonewall Sports San Francisco. Again, thank you all for being part of this fantastic opportunity. We're going to be covering off just the foundational aspects of how the game is played and some of the rules and aspects that you should be aware of. Let's go ahead and delve into the introduction of kickball. So in a nutshell, there are two teams in kickball. It is one team versus another. Each team is going to have probably around 20 folks on the roster, but the two teams are going to take turns alternating who is what we would call kicking and who is what we would call fielding. So you could think of the kicking team as the team that is currently on offense. They're trying to score points, and the fielding team is on defense. They are trying to stop the kicking team from scoring points. And the bulk of this presentation is going to be focused on how the kicking team operates, because everything the fielding team is doing on defense is to counter what the kicking team is attempting to do. So quick lay of the land or an overview of the field. For those of you who are familiar with baseball or softball, this probably looks relatively familiar to you. You will have a kicker who will start in the kicking box here. They will kick a ball into the field of play with the ultimate goal of advancing themselves and their teammates around each of these three bases before reaching home plate and scoring a run. Now, the fielding team has 10 players on the field at any one time. You have a pitcher, a catcher. Pitcher is going to be the individual that starts every single play. The ball starts in the pitcher's hand, and the pitcher will go ahead and release the ball in the direction of home plate, where the kicker will then either not kick it or attempt to kick it. And everything flows from there. So we'll be going through a few scenarios in this presentation of how these fielders work. Ultimately, these fielders are attempting to prevent the runners from moving around the bases and ultimately reaching home plate. These are some terms that we're going to be using. Every single play starts with the pitcher rolling the ball to the kicker. So the kicker stands behind home plate, is going to kick a ball that is pitched to them into the field. Once this is done, the kicker is going to run from home plate towards first base. So they're going to be running along this line from home plate to first base. They're going to move as fast as they can, because once they've kicked the ball, they are now in running mode. And their goal is to reach first base before the fielding team can get them out. So a base is a safe zone where runners can stop along their way to moving back towards home plate. Again, the ultimate objective for a given runner is to make it around all three bases and get back to home plate in order to score points. And an out occurs when the fielding team successfully prevents a runner from moving around the bases back to home plate. So we're going to be talking about some of the ways that you can get out. So the safety base is this orange base right next to first base. So the purpose of the safety base is to provide a location for a runner to move through on their way to first base. When you are, say, kicking and you're making a run towards first base, go ahead and, just as a general rule, run through the orange base just to the right of the white base here. The purpose of this is to prevent collisions between the runner who's running to first base and the person who is playing first base. Because oftentimes the first base person is going to be standing on the white plate in order to make an out, and we want to prevent collision. If you're running to first base, make it a habit to run through the orange safety base. Overall objective, how to win. A runner scores one run when they reach home plate after touching all three previous bases, first, second, and third. And again, the fielding team is attempting to prevent a runner from scoring a run by fielding outs. And ultimately, the game is won by the team that scores the most runs. So each team will have an equal number of opportunities to score runs, and ultimately whoever scores the most runs wins the game. We're going to delve into the base running portion here. So the primary focus of this section is to look at a series of scenarios that are very common for base runners to find themselves in. And this will hopefully start to put the pieces together about what a runner, their goals are, and how they can avoid getting out and how fielders can get them out. So with our first scenario, kick and run. So in these scenarios, the purple smiley face folks are going to be the team on offense, and the red smiley faces represent fielders. So the red team in this case is on defense. So in this scenario, you have a kicker, the purple individual, who is ready to kick a ball, and there are no runners currently on the bases. So every single game is going to start with this exact scenario where you have nobody on base and the kicker is going to attempt to reach first base. So let's go ahead and overview what takes place in this fundamental scenario. So in every single situation, the play will always begin with the pitcher right here releasing the ball, and the ball will move towards home plate. The kicker can choose to either kick the ball or not kick the ball. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail in the next section. But in this scenario, the kicker is going to kick the ball towards left field. So you'll see here the red ball has now moved over to the left side of the field, kind of close to where the left fielder is. So once the kicker kicks the ball, they are going to run or move as fast as they can towards the safety base, the orange base. Now in this scenario, the left fielder has moved to the ball. They've picked up the ball off the ground, and the runner, as you'll see here, so I've got the runner running through the orange base. They've been able to make it to first base before the left fielder was able to get the ball over to first base. So the fielding team in this scenario, the left fielder has picked up the ball. They've run and or thrown the ball over towards the first base person. Now, if the first base person was, say, able to get this ball and stand on the white base before the runner reached the base, the runner would be out. But alas, the runner was too quick and the runner is safe. So the first base person is going to pass the ball back to the pitcher to conclude the play. So every single play is going to start with the pitcher. The pitcher releases the ball towards the kicker, and the play does not end until the ball is returned to the pitcher. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are fielding. If you don't know what to do, in general, it is a good idea to move the ball back towards your pitcher as quickly as possible. This individual who just kicked has now become a runner on first base. So you see how they've moved. They ran through the orange safety base. They are now on the white base, and their next objective is to get to second. So again, this scenario is going to play out in every game that you play. And ultimately, the goal for the kicker is to kick away from all the fielders if possible to give them enough time to get through that orange base. So we're going to build off of this first example. So our kicker from the previous example is now a runner on first base. And remember, this person's objective is to get from first base to second base. The way that they're going to do that is when the kicker, so we now have a new teammate here who's going to be kicking. This kicker is going to kick the ball out into the field. And once that ball is kicked, just like how the kicker runs to first base, once the ball is kicked, a runner who is on a base can then leave the base and attempt to reach the next location. So just like in our previous example, every play begins with a pitch. So the pitcher is going to roll the ball over to home plate, and our second kicker is going to kick the ball. Now this time, you'll see the ball is a lot closer. So this might have been like a bunt, but it was a soft kick. It didn't go very far. And the third base person has gone to pick up the ball. You'll see that our kicker is now running as fast as they can towards that orange base. And you will also see that the individual who was on first base is now running towards second. So we'll go back for a second before the kick. You have somebody on first and the kicker at home. The ball has been kicked, and now both runners are attempting to advance to the next base. Now, in this scenario, you've got your third base person is going to be able to field this ball. When I say field, I mean like corral, basically pick up the ball and secure it. And they're going to start running towards first base. So now they're in a bit of a foot race with the kicker who's trying to get to first base. But as you can see, the third base person passes the ball to first base. And you'll see that the first base person is standing on the white plate, and the first base person catches the ball. So the first base person has the ball with their foot on the white base before the kicker reaches the base. This is a very common out that you will see in kickball. It's very common to see somebody trying to run to first base, and the fielders are trying to throw the ball to their first base person before that runner can reach the base. So ultimately, this individual is out. However, our friend who was on first base has reached second successfully, and the ball is returned to the pitcher in order to end the play. So in this scenario, we've gone over an example of how to get a runner out by relaying a ball to a base towards which a runner is proceeding. In general, on pretty much every play, you will be able to throw the ball if you're a fielder. If you can get the ball to first base before the runner gets to first base, you're guaranteed to get an out. And ultimately, you want to get as many outs as you can as quickly as possible. And similar to like in baseball, and I believe softball as well, first base is the only base where that is acceptable in terms of being safe. So yes, you may absolutely run past the orange safety base into the field here and circle back and come back to the base, and you would be totally safe. So don't slow down as you get close to the base. You can overrun first base. That's totally fine. Keep this in mind. In this scenario, we had somebody on first base. Now we have somebody on second base and nobody on first base. So this brings up a concept. This is the concept of a forced out. So as a rule, each individual base may only house one runner at a time at most. You couldn't have a scenario where you have two individuals, say, standing on second. Whichever runner is, say, the second runner that's behind, they'd have to either go back to first base, or the runner who's in front would have to move to third base. You cannot have two runners on one base. This fact gives rise to scenarios where a runner must proceed to the next base. A forced runner is a runner that has no empty bases behind them. An example of this would be in that previous scenario, we had an individual on first base and an individual who was kicking. So the individual who kicked, the kicker, needs to get to first base. And since that's their destination, that means that whoever is on first cannot stay on first. They must run to second. So in that example, you have a forced runner. There are no unoccupied bases behind the front runner. So a forced runner is a runner who has no empty bases behind them. This has some implications from the standpoint of, as the name would suggest, whether a runner must run or not. So let's go ahead and put this into practice. The unforced runner. Can anybody tell me, is the runner on second base here, is this a forced runner or an unforced runner? And bonus points if you can explain why.
Unforced runner, because the kicker has an open base to go to.
That's exactly right. In this scenario, the individual on second base is an unforced runner. And that's because exactly the kicker here has a base to run to that is currently unoccupied. This brings up the scenario as follows. What happens if the kicker kicks the ball in a location that is not advantageous to our person on second base, our runner on second base? So in this scenario, the pitcher is going to release the ball. Our kicker is going to kick it. And oh my goodness, they have kicked the ball pretty much right between second and third base. In this scenario, do you think that the second base person would like to run? Probably not, because if the second base person attempts to run to third base, chances are whoever fields this ball is just going to tag them with the ball. The ball is right in their path. So this is a scenario where the runner on second base is going to opt to remain on second base and allow their teammate to run through the safety base and get to first base safely. In this scenario, this kicker kicker may have known that their teammate doesn't have to run, and they kicked it to this side of the field away from first base to allow themselves the ability to get to first base easily. So the fielder now picks up the ball, they throw it to first base, but it's way too late, and the first base person is going to go ahead and pass it back to the pitcher. So now we have a runner on first base and on second base. Are there any empty bases on the field? Do the people on first and second base have any empty bases to rely on? The answer there is no. So now you have two runners who are forced. So when the next kicker comes up to kick, both of these runners are going to have to attempt to advance. So this person on the runner on second base has to get to third base, and the runner on first base has to get to second base. And the question was essentially, I believe, if, say, the kicker kicks a ball into the air, does the person on first base have to run? Let's go ahead and answer that question. A fly ball is a ball that's been kicked and has yet to hit the ground. So essentially a kicker is out if their ball is caught by a fielder. And here's the part about tagging up. So all runners must touch the base that they are currently on after a fielder touches the fly ball. So we'll go through a scenario here that illustrates this concept of tagging up. This is a topic that trips a lot of folks up. Let's go ahead and go through an example. So if we recall, we had a runner on first and second base. Now we have a new kicker. In comes the pitch. The kicker is going to go ahead and kick a fly ball. So you'll see that this line here is curved because the ball is arcing, it's in the air. So the ball has not made contact with the ground, and it's going towards our right fielder. Now notice that the kicker is running towards the safety base, but the runners on first and second have not moved. This is the concept of tagging up in action. What's happening is the first and second base runners are waiting to see if this fielder makes the catch. If this fielder catches the fly ball, that means that the runner on first base has to touch first base before they can do anything else. In fact, they have to touch first base. Otherwise, the right fielder could throw it to first base and they would be out. Same deal goes with second base. The runner on second base is not moving, because if the individual from second base, say, starts running to third base and the right fielder catches the ball, the right fielder could then throw the ball to second base. And if somebody from the fielding team catches the ball and steps on second base, the runner on second would be out. What you're seeing here in action is the concept of tagging up. So if there's a ball that is kicked into the air and it looks like the fielding team might catch it, it's a good idea for you as the runner to not move very far away from your base. You can take like a step or two off the base, but keep in mind, if the fielders catch that ball, you have to go back to the base you were just on and touch that base. So in this scenario, the ball has been caught. So the kicker is out. You'll see that they are gone. And once the catch has been made and you as the runner touch your base, you are then free to move off your base and advance. So in this scenario, a catch has been made, but notice that the catch is on the far right side of the field, which means that the path from second to third is relatively open. Our runner on second base is going to take off once they've touched their base with their foot, and they are going to make it to third base before they can be fielded out. That's an illustration of tagging up in action. When a ball is kicked and it's in the air, if that ball is caught, all runners must make sure that they touch the base that they started on before they can advance.
Perfect. Now, that was the base running portion. The kicking piece, we're just going to be talking a bit about what constitutes a strike, ball, and foul. These are terms that you probably, if you're familiar with baseball or softball, you may recall. So we're going to talk a little bit about what constitutes these various types of pitches in kickball. So the strike zone. The strike zone, a pitch is considered a strike, meaning kicker should generally kick that pitch if the ball bounces at least two times before, bounce at least one time before hitting the plate. The second bounce can be within the box that you see on the screen here. The box for a strike, the strike zone, so to speak, is 1 foot to the left, right, and behind the plate in all directions. So the plate is a pentagon. So the strike zone is a larger pentagon. Well, I guess it would be a pentagonal prism because there's a height component to this too. So the ball must drop below 1 foot above the strike zone. So you see on the left, you have a 1 foot, buffer around the home plate that constitutes a strike, and the ball must be under 1 foot within that strike zone. So say, for example, the ball touches the ground, maybe just to the right of the plate, midway up the plate, that would constitute a strike because the ball has dropped under 1 foot and it is within the 1 foot buffer zone of the plate. So any part of the ball at all, if it comes within that box, that's a strike. If the ball lands right on the front edge of the plate on its second bounce, that is also a strike. It's a very mean pitch, but it is technically a strike. So a ball, and I guess it's worth pointing out as well, if a kicker attempts to kick the ball but misses the ball entirely, that would be considered a strike. That would be a swing and a miss. And just like in softball or baseball, that is a strike. And a ball is any ball that either doesn't bounce 2 times before, getting into the strike zone, or if the ball is just outside of that pentagonal prism altogether, that would be a ball. You do not need to kick that as a kicker.
Oh,
You get 3 strikes and you're out. You misjudge, if you misjudge, you think something's going to be a ball, but the umpire calls it a strike. That's just 1 strike. Do keep in mind as well, if there is a pitch that looks like it's going to be a strike, but you just don't like it, you don't have to kick it. You can take a strike. You could also just you could also, you could just go ahead and take that strike. But just keep in mind, don't get too many because once you get to 3, you are out. But it's not all fun and games for the pitcher. If the pitcher gets to 4 balls, so if they give you 4 pitches that are outside of the strike zone and you don't kick them, you get to walk to first base. In the scenario in which the pitcher doesn't give you any strikes at all, they just pitch balls at you, you get to walk to second base instead. All right. We'll touch on foul balls here as well. So you are out if you kick 4 foul balls as a kicker. So what is a foul ball? Any number of things can constitute a foul ball. Don't get too intimidated by the image on the left. Essentially, if you kick a ball twice, so if it hits, say, your shin and then your foot, that's a foul. Can't do that. If you step on the ball and stop it on the plate, that's called trapping the ball. So don't stomp on the ball basically, and stop it on the plate. If you hit it with your above, so you can't hit it with your thigh or anything like that. Most people don't try to do that, but if it does happen, that would be considered a foul. Outside of the kicking box, don't fret too much about the size of the kicking box. It is quite large. The main thing I would say for you, just make sure you don't kick the ball in front of the home plate. That would probably be the most common scenario I would see for people getting a foul. Don't step on the ball and stop it. Don't kick the ball twice. And don't kick it with anything above your knee, basically. There's also the out of bounds portion. Here's an illustration that's going to show you something. So for a kick to be considered a foul ball, the criteria must be met. If the ball makes the first contact in the red triangle area, that is a foul ball. Basically, if you kick a ball and it touches the ground for the first time outside of the baseline, outside of the diamond shape of the field, that would be a foul. Alternatively, if you kick the ball and it's, say, on the ground, but it moves into that red area before it gets to third base or first base, so highlighted in red, that would also be considered a foul ball. So if I kick a ball on the ground and it goes from home plate and it has a hard left turn and it goes out of the baseline before it surpasses third base, that would be a foul. Do keep in mind that if you kick the ball and it's on the ground and it goes beyond third base and then it veers out of bounds in that blue area, that would be considered fair. So if the ball first touches the ground outside of the baseball diamond, that is a foul no matter what. If the ball is on the ground and it moves into that foul territory, if the ball moves into the foul territory before it passes first or third base, then it is a foul. Otherwise, it is totally fair. And the final criterion would be no player has made contact. So like as a fielder, if the ball is say coming to me at third base and I just like punch the ball out of bounds, that doesn't count. That's not a foul. You've touched it. That is a fair ball. Recapping all the ways you can get out. You can get out by being tagged. Fielders move the ball to the base that you're running to, strike out, foul out, or get your ball caught. Don't run out of the baseline too far. All right, let's do a quick recap then of just some of the concepts we've done. Fielding team objectives. Your goal ultimately is to prevent runs. Fielder is attempting to stop the runners from scoring by getting them out. You can strike them out. You can deliver a ball to a base that the runner is running to. You can touch the runner with the ball, and ultimately the goal is to prevent those runners from reaching home plate. So as a fielder, that's what you're trying to do. Kicking team objectives, you're trying to score runs. You as a kicker are trying to get to first by not striking out. So you can't get 3 strikes, don't get 4 fouls, don't kick the ball that's super easy to catch, and ultimately trying to kick a ball that's difficult for the fielders to corral and get to a base. And that your ultimate goal is to get to home plate safely. And you do that by getting to the next base before the ball can. And don't get hit by the ball.